$5 a share. That's around 13% higher than the initial price that was mooted back in October. So they're clearly having to pay a premium, but it does give them greater access to the jewellery area, which has been their weak spot compared to peers like Richemont. And an analyst note from Jefferies this morning saying that in fact the financials aren't reflective of Tiffany's brand. Actually, it seems like quite a good deal in terms of that share price. They do say it's a particular negative for Richemont. It's going to face greater competition. And they say in terms of Kering, Gucci, the Gucci parent, they say it's very positive they didn't get involved because they were concerned that they might have tried to jump in. So it's positive perhaps for Kering. But again, this deal, just looking at the LVMH share price, is up around 1.7%.
Okay, and it's big deals also in pharma land, because you've got Novartis continuing their buying spree. This time they've picked up the medicines company.
That's right. So this is around $6.8 billion, and they will gain access to a promising cholesterol drug. So it is about a 45% premium to the closing price that was on November 18th before news of a deal emerged. So they're clearly playing another big premium again in this deal. However, this drug, incliricin, which is, as I mentioned, cholesterol, it could reach margins around 30% within the next few years, according to analysts. So it's looking like a good product there. Although BI, Bloomberg Intelligence, does note that the price is around 11 times consensus earnings. So again, another premium being paid.
And if you fancy a strong cup of tea to deal with all that M&A, you might have one that isn't necessarily going to be Unilever's for much longer. PG Tips, they're thinking of selling it.
That's correct. So potentially selling a British institution, PG Tips here. This is apparently millennials aren't drinking tea anymore, and the younger generation just in general aren't consuming as much tea as we.
Thank you so much for explaining that to all of our overseas listeners. PG Tips is indeed a British institution, so thank you for that tip as to what it is.
So potentially PepsiCo could be a potential buy, according to the Telegraph. That's after they, of course, bought Costa Coffee. So again, looking to get into the hot beverage industry more. But that's all we have in terms of the Telegraph report that's out. So that's for Unilever. Shares are down around 0.7% this morning.
Millennials, eh? What can you do with them? Thanks very much indeed. Joe Easton there joining us with the stocks to watch this morning.
Okay, let's talk about today's top stories then, away from deals and tea. China says that it will raise penalties on those who steal intellectual property. Bloomberg Daybreak Asia's Brian Curtis has more now from Hong Kong.
This is one of the sticking points in trade talks with the United States. These guidelines aim to stop frequent violations by 2022 and make it easier for victims to get compensation. China will also look at lowering the thresholds for criminal punishment for those who steal IP. The U.S. wants China to commit to cracking down on IP theft, and this is a step in that direction. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And here in the UK, the Prime Minister Boris Johnson has launched the Conservative Party's election manifesto, pledging to reinforce the National Health Service and to cap future tax rises.
I want it to be an exciting and productive year, a year of prosperity and growth. Do you want to wake up on Friday the 13th of December and find a nightmare on Downing Street? A Corbyn-Sturgeon coalition of chaos? I say, let's go carbon neutral by 2050 and Corbyn neutral by Christmas.
The Tories hold a double-digit lead in most opinion polls ahead of the vote on December the 12th, with one analysis suggesting that Johnson will win a healthy parliamentary majority. Labour dismissed the Tory manifesto as a billionaire's dream.
And now, turning to more corporate news, Saudi Aramco is briefing potential investors in Dubai. That's as part of a sales push for the energy giant's initial public offering. Now, we've learned that the invitation-only meetings included discussions on strategy and also the dividend. These talks are the first outside of Saudi Arabia. Aramco plans to sell 1.5% of its stock.
And Alibaba says the retail portion of its Hong Kong IPO is oversubscribed. It's increasing the retail portion of shares offered to 50 million, almost 5 times higher than originally planned. The company's priced a total of 500 million shares at 176 Hong Kong dollars apiece and is expected to raise net proceeds of almost 90 billion Hong Kong dollars in the listing. Trading's due to begin on Tuesday.
And veteran investor Carl Icahn is said to be planning to name 10 potential directors in an attempt to seize control of the energy energy producer Occidental. Sources say that he'll move before Friday's deadline for board nominations. ICANN has been a vocal critic of Occidental and the CEO Vicky Holub over its $37 billion takeover of Anadarko Petroleum in August, and then the $10 billion it needed from Warren Buffett to push that deal through.
OK, let's get the latest now in global news. Here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans. Leanne, good morning.
Roger, good morning. In Hong Kong, residents are handing a sweeping victory to pro-democracy candidates. That's after local elections with a record 2.9 million votes. Results showing pro-Beijing candidates won only about 12% of the seats up for grabs. That's versus 65% just 4.5 years ago. It's the first ballot since that unrest began in the city almost 6 years ago. Japan and South Korea continue bickering after they reached a last-minute deal to rescue an expiring intelligence sharing pact. Bloomberg's Isabel Reynolds says this raises questions about ties between the two allies.
Japan rejected a South Korean complaint about the wording of an announcement that the two sides would hold talks on a dispute over export controls. Seoul accused Tokyo of intentionally leaking and distorting information about the agreement. The two countries said Saturday they would work toward a summit meeting in China next month. In Tokyo, Isabel Reynolds, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Italy may be willing to compromise on a German plan for further integration of the European Union's banking system. That includes setting limits on holdings of sovereign debt. Bloomberg's John Verlaine has all those details.
Vincenzo Amendola, Minister for European Affairs, said in an interview he is confident that a good compromise can be found next month. Italy has expressed concern on a German plan to consider more cooperation on guaranteeing deposits in exchange for demands such as stricter rules on banks' sovereign debt holdings. In Rome, John Verlaine, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg is running for president in 2020. He's joining a crowded race of Democrats. He brings with him a mix of moderate policies and experience in business and City Hall. The 77-year-old says President Trump is an existential threat to the U.S. and its values. Michael Bloomberg is the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP, the parent company to Bloomberg News. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Caroline.
Thank you so much, Leanne. Now, with the morning sports news, here's George Alderman.
Sheffield United manager Chris Wilder says they wouldn't always celebrate a draw, but feels his side deserved to after a thriller with Manchester United. The home team went from 2-0 up to 3-2 down at Bramall Lane before Ollie McBurney's late equaliser meant the Premier League game finished 3-3. Wilder's impressed with how they're handling their first season back in the top flight.
It is difficult because people say, well, you can't keep saying how far you come or whatever, but we've got players that are competing against world-class players, record, goalkeeper, centre-half, right-back, and the players at the top of the pitch, and my boys have gone toe-to-toe with them.
There's a clash between two bottom-half teams this evening as Aston Villa host Newcastle. Only goal difference separates Rangers and Celtic at the top of the Scottish Premiership once again. Stephen Gerrard's side moved back level on points with their rivals after winning 3-1 at Hamilton. Third-place Aberdeen were held to a 1-1 draw by bottom team St Johnstone. Aberdeen will announce plans for fresh investment this morning following a new partnership with US Major League Soccer side Atlanta United. Chairman Stuart Milne will step down next month as part of the restructure, with Dave Cormack taking his place. Holders Celtic will face championship opponents in the fourth round of the Scottish Cup. They'll make the trip to Partick in January. Meanwhile, Rangers will host League One Stranraer. Rafa Nadal helped Spain win the Davis Cup for the first time since 2011 last night. The world tennis number one sealed a 2-0 victory over Canada in the final in Madrid. Great Britain were knocked out by Spain in the semis on Saturday. South African World Cup winner Faf de Klerk and England's Tom Curry returned to help Sale register their first win of the season in Rugby Union's European Champions Cup. They beat La Rochelle 25-15 to go second in Pool 2, but fellow Premiership side Gloucester are still looking for their opening group stage victory after losing 30-27 at Montpellier.
George Alderman there with the latest sport. Now here's a look at what you should be watching out for this week. Today, the ECB chief economist, Philip Lane, is speaking about monetary policy in London. While in the US, all eyes will be on the Fed chairman, Jerome Powell, giving his first speech following his meeting with President Trump. On Tuesday, Alibaba makes its trading debut in Hong Kong with plans to raise at least $12 billion. The listing could be this year's biggest stock offering globally. On Wednesday, the revised reading of the US GDP for the third quarter is going to be released. On Thursday, Thursday, the US celebrates Thanksgiving, and equity and bond markets are closed for the holiday. And the following day is the shopping bonanza known as Black Friday. Be watched for signs of strength in consumer confidence.
Yeah, indeed. Thanksgiving week. Now, still ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, Saudi officials have met with investors in Dubai as they look to ensure the success of the Aramco IPO. Will the sales push be enough, though, to drum up support? We'll be discussing that next. We're live on Bloomberg's European headquarters here in London. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Startups and research universities like New Jersey Institute of Technology are fueling the innovation economy. And few people are better positioned to see what's on the horizon in New Jersey than physicist and state representative Andrew Zwicker.
How technology is transforming our financial sector is revolutionary, and so much of that is in New Jersey. We are innovators when it comes to agriculture, and there is opportunity now for great transformation in how are we going to grow food in an ever-growing population, and how do we turn urban centers into agricultural centers. Autonomous vehicles is another one where we have some of the world's leading experts, and how this will transform how those who are either elderly or are visually impaired or mobilely impaired can start to use autonomous vehicles to transform their lives and have access to transportation they could have never had before.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu/research.
Are you looking for senior care for your mom or dad but don't know where to start? Hi, I'm Joan London with The Place for Mom. Nobody knows your parent or loved one better than you, and nobody knows senior living better than the experts at A Place for Mom. It's a free service, and we've helped thousands of families find the right place for their mom or dad. There's a place for answers, A Place for Mom. Call today.
Call A Place for Mom at 1-800-391-1755. That's 1-800-391-1755.
Melissa from Michigan. I work an extra part-time job serving lunch at my child's school, but I still can't afford to put food on our table.
Daniel from California. Choosing whether to pay the rent or pay to fix the car to get to work doesn't leave us with much at all. Now we can't even pay for meals.
Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Taylor Riggs.
Splunk is the world's first data-to-everything platform. Its software collects machine data and provides insight into businesses worldwide. Joining us for an exclusive interview, it is Splunk President and CEO, Doug Merritt. I wanted to talk about this new pricing model, the volume-based and then booking the revenue annually instead of on a multi-year basis. Both of those analysts love today. Why the change?
One of the biggest issues we've had with Splunk is you get so much value out of the platform, and it's a data volume-based product that people get scared on how much volume is going to go through. And we've heard for years that the lack of predictability is something they'd want to have a better option around. And so we came out with two pricing metrics a month and change ago that were one's an enhancement, one is new. The enhancement for data volume contracts is we've tiered the pricing and really condensed the tiers into much broader bands with an unlimited option at the upper end of that pricing curve. The alternative, which is probably more fundamentally appropriate long term, is just the amount of infrastructure that you need to operate the product. We rolled both out because the way that you use the product could make one more advantageous for a customer versus the other.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Roger Hearing. Time for a Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. So over to the first word breaking news desk in Berlin for today's morning call. Here's Richard Jones. Richard, good morning.
Good morning, Roger. Asian equities rose across the board today, with the Hang Seng and Kospi leading gains, up 1.4% and 1% respectively, with the Nikkei 225 up 0.8 and the Shanghai Composite up 0.7. U.S. equity futures are also moving higher, with the E-mini S&P and E-mini Nasdaq futures both up by 0.3%. European equities have opened up higher across the board this morning, with the Euro Stoxx 50, DAX, FTSE 100 and CAC 40 all up by about 0.6 to 0.7%. Looking at the sector breakdown, gains are being led by basic resources, autos, and banks. Turning to the bond markets, the U.S. 10-year yield is 1.5 basis points higher at 1.79%, with the 10-year German Bund yield trading higher by a basis point at minus 0.34%. In the FX space, the Bloomberg Dollar Index is trading lower by about 0.1%, with all G10 currencies, excluding the Japanese yen, higher versus the greenback. As for data in Europe, the key reading today will be the German IFO survey results, released at the top of the next hour. We'll also get a handful of ECB speakers today, including Villeroy, Holtzman, Lane, Mersch, and Hernandez de Cos. That's it from me. For more macro breaking news, it's SQUA Go on the Bloomberg terminal. Roger?
Thanks, Richard. That's the Bloomberg Business Flash. Now, just before we go to the global news, a breaking headline: Turkey has begun testing the S-400 missiles radar system in Ankara. That breaking in the last few minutes. That, of course, is a Russian system, and the US has threatened sanctions over that. We're keeping an eye, of course, on the Turkish lira, currently down 0.2%, 5.7238 at the moment. We'll keep an eye, of course, on how that goes in relation to that story. Now, let's get the latest global news with Leanne Gerrans. Leanne, good morning.
Roger, good morning. A 23-year-old man will appear in court later, charged following the discovery of 39 bodies in a lorry container in Essex. Christopher Kennedy from County Armagh is accused of human trafficking offences. 2 other men remain in custody on manslaughter charges. One of them, 25-year-old Maurice Robinson from County Armagh, is due at the Old Bailey later today. More than 60 doctors have written to the Home Secretary saying WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange urgently needs medical treatment. They've told Priti Patel that if he doesn't get it, he could die in prison. In a letter published by WikiLeaks, the medics say an independent checkup is needed to see if he's fit enough for legal proceedings. And finally, maybe Elon Musk will have the last laugh. He says Tesla has received 200,000 orders for its Cybertruck. That's despite having 2 windows unexpectedly shatter in Thursday's big debut. Still, there's no risk for would-be buyers of the truck. Their $100 deposit is still fully refundable. Global News 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Caroline.
Thank you so much, Leanne. Now, to Saudi Aramco, officials met investors in Dubai yesterday in a sales push for an IPO that could be the world's largest, of course. The investor meetings are Aramco's first outside of Saudi Arabia since the world's most profitable company said earlier this month that it would sell 1.5% of its stock on Riyadh's Tadawul. Well, for more on this top story, let's go live to Dubai, where Bloomberg's executive editor for energy and commodities, Stuart Wallace, is standing by. Stuart, good to speak to you. So are there any signs, actually, that Aramco is finding new investors in the Emirates?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the sense we got yesterday, and it was a relatively low-key affair. I mean, yes, it was held in the Ritz-Carlton, which is, not exactly a B&B, but still not quite the normal Saint et Lumière that we get with the Aramco events. But our sense at the end of it was that, yes, they probably have got some investors on side. Now, there may not be big hitters. I mean, I don't think they have any cornerstone investors as yet who would take a big chunk of the equity. But we had a lot of fund managers going through, and they were having these one-on-one meetings, and most of them were coming out saying, look, we didn't really discover anything new, but it's clear that this is an interesting opportunity for us. Beyond that, there's a good chance that the stock is going to be included in several indexes, particularly emerging market indexes, in which case a whole bunch of investors will either be obliged to buy the equity, or at least to partially invest in the equity, or at least will be thinking about it. So I think there's a sense that they're probably picking up a few investors along the way, but I don't think it changes the overall picture of the size of this offering.
Now, Stuart, I guess the test of the pudding will be in the eating when the stock actually starts trading next month and what happens with the share price. Are people thinking that the Saudi government is going to basically prop up this equity, preserve the yield?
Yes. Yes is the short answer, absolutely. I mean, obviously for them it's a matter of national pride. So there's a couple of things to think about here. Number one, the free float is going to be tiny. I mean, it's 1.5%, which, in dollar terms is enormous, but within the scope of Aramco is a small sliver, and certainly less than the ceiling they'd set at the start of the process, which I think was about 5%. But secondly, the retail investors in Saudi Arabia have basically been told, look, if you hang on to your shares for a number of months, we will issue with bonus shares at the end of that period. in addition to that, the other investors that they're getting together are by and large the wealthy families within Saudi Arabia, and it seems highly unlikely that any of them would buy into the IPO and then sell out immediately. So we may actually, when you factor in the index question as well, i.e. a whole bunch of fund managers will be obliged to buy the stock because it's included in an index, we may actually find that the shares are not only well supported but may even go up just because you have all these fund managers that suddenly need to acquire equity for their funds to reflect the index, and there's probably not going to be that much selling out there initially.
Interesting. What do you think it means, though, more broadly for OPEC and the policy meeting that they've got next month?
Yeah, I mean, I think our base case for the OPEC meeting in a couple of weeks is that they'll roll over their existing agreement. I mean, we've had strong indications both from the Saudis and the Russians, who are in effect the two main players in this coalition, that they have no interest really in changing things. Now, to some extent, they're relying on weakness amongst some of the members, the so-called Fragile Five or the Fragile Six, depending on how you count it. So the likes of Venezuela, Iran, Libya, and so on, where production is much less than any of those countries would like, basically for external factors, be it sanctions or civil war or what have you. So they're going to be relying heavily on those parties to keep production contained without them having to do any extra heavy lifting, as it were.
All right, thanks very much indeed for that. That was Stuart Wallace, the Bloomberg Executive Editor for Energy and Commodities, speaking to us from Dubai on the impact of Aramco, where Aramco is going to go in terms of this. It's been such a long time coming, this IPO, hasn't it?
Well flagged, but still hugely important. Could be the biggest ever IPO. In terms of what is coming up next, though, we're going to talk about another deal, which is the jewel in the crown, LVMH, agreeing to buy Tiffany's for more than $16 billion. So more on that deal next. Seems like quite a coup for Bernard Arnault. So we'll delve into that, what risks there might be, of course, in this industry with big exposure, for example, to Asia. One of the other big stories we've been talking about this morning is Hong Kong and the win for pro-democracy voters over the weekend in Hong Kong. This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. Investors continue to eye U.S.-China trade talks. Beijing is promising to do more to protect intellectual property rights, but there's no agreement on any trade deal just yet. This Friday marks the unofficial start to the holiday shopping season, with e-commerce expected to stay strong. Bloomberg Intelligence says we could see deceleration in mobile gaming, at least partially offset by the emergence of 5G and wearables. A number of retailers report quarterly earnings this week, including Best Buy, Dick's Sporting Goods, Burlington Stores, Dollar Tree, and Lululemon. We'll be hearing later today from the Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. The Rhode Island speech will be Powell's first since his meeting with President Trump last week. 5G wireless service is a little closer to reality today as AT&T begins taking orders for its first 5G phone, the Samsung Galaxy Note 10. It won't come cheap. The Note 10 carries a $1,300 price tag. I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
What if you could keep the top economic experts in a conference room next to your office without having to feed them?
Do we need better optics? Do we need some substance? Do CEOs care about ESG?
We have seen quite a lot of stimulus pumped into the system already.
It's the biggest warning yet about the financial risks of climate change.
Now there are more ways to hear us. Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and at BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
More than just a game, baseball is big business. For the chief revenue officer of the New York Mets, this means overseeing complex operations, key financial drivers, and interpreting data to make critical decisions every day.
How is your business managing complexity? Cohn Resnick can help you improve performance through an integrated business planning strategy that optimizes your data, streamlines processes, and keeps you ahead of the competition. Explore more at cohnresnick.com/MLB. Cohn Resnick, Advisory Assurance Tax. Transform your game.
I've got to tell you about our beautiful city break in Bath. Midweek is the perfect time to beat the crowds. Just an hour and a half by train from London. It was so relaxing. We headed straight for Bath Christmas Market. Oh, I can still smell the roasted chestnuts and mulled wine from the chalets. Then it was time for glow-in-the-dark mini-golf. I got a hole-in-one. Well, 3. I'm a bit rusty, okay? There's so much to do in Bath. I'm already planning my next trip.
Discover the magic of Bath this Christmas. Plan ahead at visitbath.co.uk/Christmas.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
'Tis the season to be hunched over your laptop. Not on our watch. In real life, you can fill your senses and your baskets. Feel all the sights, sounds, lols, and OMGs. Wear laughing emojis on actual smiley faces. Battery is running low. Take the kids to Santa's Grotto. In real life, you can find just the right present using the most advanced search engine in the world. Your eyes. We hunt in real life. Brent Cross, London. Free parking for all sleighs and cars.
For the independent bookseller who found you that first